co-founder of, what is it,
Arkona.
Arkona, so I didn't want to butcher that, and the host of International Growth Podcast. Thank you for being on the show today.
You bet. I love it, Ron. And it's intentional growth. It's all good. You're definitely not the first person to do that.
I actually
like Mr. International. Like we'll take it. We actually had someone do that at my marketing corner. He's like, we're gonna call you Pitbull now. I'm like, come on, man.
What's funny is it's right on the screen down here, but on my show notes above here, I actually must have spell corrected me. I let it autocomplete or something. So that's what got it.
Oh, it's all good, man.
We good. So intentional growth, and that's actually an important distinction, right? Looking at something with intent. So it makes it. I love the tagline, because I mean, a lot of people, it's an afterthought. So let's just jump in with your origin story. Kind of, how did you get started in this space? Just kind of tell us.
Not being intentional. That's how I realized that the word is really damn important. Yeah, absolutely, Ron. My exposure to business came from my dad. He was a hustler, still is a hustler. He started our family business in the early 90s, mortgaged our house, bought $250,000 of used Panasonic copiers, and the rest is history, man. Like he had 30-day terms and sold them all and just kept going. And so I worked in another business my whole life, man, like moving copiers around, helping to move buildings, and then, cold calling back when I was in high school. Swore on my grave I'd never go work for him, like a lot of second generation families are. And then 2009 hit, financial crisis. The bottom of the margins in the equipment just disappeared. And at that point, we're doing 21 million in revenue, 115 employees. And so I started full time, and I was in a banking meeting with my dad and a CPA meeting, and we'd lost like a little over 900 grand that year. And so we spent the next 5.5, 6 years turning the business around. So I think I replaced and turned around about 60% of the employees by the time I was 25. Sold a couple of branches for cash, and then we rolled out a new accounting and ERP system. I built out the managed IT service and the software automation, rebranded so we could go to head to head with all the other kind of business to business tech players. Got to this point where I was the executive vice president, so I was pretty much running the business, a lot of the operations, and my dad was in the visionary. So we're kind of tag team in the top part of the company. Kind of became my baby. Like it was just like my vision. I really just enjoyed the people, where we were going. But what happened was my dad and I had this proverbial Groundhog Day conversation, which is he's selling. He was like selling, not selling, selling, not selling, selling, not selling. I'm like, dude, I'm losing my mind. Like as the one that's running the ship, depending on whether we're selling or not, like is going to impact all of my decisions. So we got to this point, Ron, where and now I can articulate this way better now than I could 10 years ago, but he wanted more distributions and more cash. Like he did not want to talk about copiers, and he wanted to essentially just be an investor, just get the hell out. But I wanted to reinvest for growth. We had put millions of dollars back into the next strategy of the business, the managed IT, so that you have one stream of cash flow. You're either reinvesting, you're taking it out, and you have to be aligned with where you're going. So we didn't understand how to get aligned. So what ended up happening, we ended up getting to the point where we felt so trapped that we ended up, hell with it. Let's just sell the business. So in 2014, we pinned the company up against a handful of local competitors, sold it in 2014, paid a lot of taxes, like 53.5%, and then paid off our debt, fired 60% of our employees. And I went, what the hell was that? And as I'm sitting in a cube next to an intern after running a $20 million business at the age of 27. And I'm like, all right, so what did we just go through? And honestly, Ron, your podcast, my podcast, all the things that are out there, 10 years ago, none of this stuff was out there.
Right.
And I realized that a lot of entrepreneurs, I was in Vistage, like a CEO peer group. So I was like, most people are doing what my dad and I did, which is, even though we had a $20 million business, we had a lifestyle business. We were sucking all the cash out of the company. So salaries, distributions, and perks, versus saying, hey, if we reinvest this cash flow, it could grow an asset and grow the equity value of this thing. But we didn't know how that worked. We didn't know what we were doing. So it was revenue, gross profit, checking account, revenue, gross profit, checking account, month to month to month. And then you just never get off that hamster wheel. So it's kind of this whole shift in mindset that I had after we sold.
Yeah. So that, and that's very, very common. It's predominant throughout all the businesses I've seen, all the business owners I've known. And it's interesting. I refer to most entrepreneurs as accidental entrepreneurs, right? They never intended to start out and like create a business. They just, they made something, a widget or whatever, and one of their buddies said, "I like one of those," so we made one for a buddy, and the next thing they know, another guy wanted one, and pretty soon they're
Mhm.
taking all their free time up, and they start thinking, "I'm making more money doing this," or if I had a couple more hours, I'd make more money doing this than I would at my day job,
Mhm.
and then they move into it, and there's no formal training, no accounting training. Nobody's ever told them what managing a company like an asset, or a financial
It's
asset
a
would ever
job, it's
even be,
income,
right?
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
you start with income, and by the way, I can absolutely validate, the accidental nature of that because, Ron, for the first couple hundred of my podcast interviews, I
Mhm.
used to start as like, "Tell me why you became an entrepreneur." And like, "I didn't try to, it was an accident." So I actually I stopped asking because it was like, well, there's so few people that actually intentionally become an entrepreneur to grow a valuable asset. It's like I found an opportunity. I wanted to, disrupt an industry, or I hated my job or my boss. I mean, it's the total e myth for sure.
It's funny is that, one of 2 things, either accidentally stumble across it or they were just kind of born that way, right? At a very young age, my father told me I was too young to work for him. He owned a painting company, and when he went to work, I grabbed a push mower and tied it to the back of my bicycle and drug it 5.5 miles. We lived in the country. The nearest little housing area was 5.5 miles into town. I just drug it all the way into town, and, like, bicycle broke, I threw it in the ditch where I could get it later and pushed it the rest of the way. I mowed lawns all day, and after, it wasn't until he didn't even really kinda know I was doing this. He kinda did, I think, but he just it didn't click until I got bit, by 2 pit bulls one day, and, uh, and the police called him, said I'd been bit on the legs by these dogs and, telling him what's going on, and, he said, "Well, let me talk to my son." He goes, "I couldn't stop him. He's over there mowing the lawn." And, as soon as I got the dog secured away from me, he said, "I told this guy, guy's already paid me. He's already left. I'm gonna go finish his lawn." And I was, like, out there push mowing this lawn with bloody legs where these dogs had bit me pretty bad. And, it's like after that, he's like, "You don't have to do that anymore. Come work with me. If you're strong enough to do that and determined enough to do that, you can climb a ladder and hold a paintbrush."
I was just saying, painting sounds a little bit safer than than that circumstance.
But, and that wasn't even the first case. I was even younger, like 4th grade. We moved to the country in the 4th grade. I was mowing lawns with my older cousin, and we landed so many accounts. My dad and my, cousin's dad, my uncle, had to go out and help us finish them, and they made us stop. So,
That's
but
awesome. I love it. I started my entrepreneur career mowing lawns as well.
yeah. So, some people are like there's some people accidentally fall in it, to some people, it's just your general nature, right? You figure out, I want X. In order to get X, I gotta go, do some type of hustle. I gotta go mow some lawns. I gotta do something. But let's talk about, like, that shift you made. You actually went from, you came out of this exit and you started looking at, ways to help other people. And, I really like that, the whole thing on your website where it's, what does it say there? View and run your company like a financial asset, right? So it's kind of, what was that shift like? And kind of give us the high level of that, and we can start diving into what the actionable steps and people can take to start looking at it that way.
So the shift happened, Ron, is that after I quit, I lasted 60 days at the seller's, or I'm sorry, 60 days at the buyer's company. No real plan. After I was like, I'm professionally unemployable. I'm not cut out for these meetings that I don't have any control over. And so I actually joined this gentleman. He had a wealth management firm. It was very, 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 very small. He was managing essentially one family's money, and I was like, I don't know, like, let's go. Like, sure, we now have some money. I never had a pot to piss in, and now my dad never got some money. Like, someone's got to manage it. Might as well learn how to do this too. So for about 18 months, I had a very, very rough learning experience because I did not sign an operating agreement with him. I did not know the stuff that we're talking about. Went in there, helped him build a firm, major disagreements, and yeah. So there was a whole partnership dispute or lack of partnership because there was no partnership. So, but what I ended up doing is helping this guy build his wealth management firm for 18 months, brought in like 20 million, 30 million bucks, something like that. But what the key part of that, Ron, is one is it was not for me. I was like, no, thanks. Like, I don't like personal wealth management, but where it clicked for me was cash flow. There's 3 financial statements for every business: income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement. And cash flow is tied to an asset that we all want that creates wealth. And I'm like, that company that we just had, like that, like what the hell? Like this thing is an asset. It's not, a lot of people, what I realized was just like my dad and I, it's like, you just kind of hope someone's going to sell it because you think of strategic reasons. You're like, oh, someone's going to want to eliminate a competitor, cross sell their markets, get the people. So like, I always thought about the strategic reasons someone would want to buy a company. But then there's this whole world of private equity and all of these other investors that like they want cash flow and they want that cash flow to grow. So like after that we sold, there's like the intersection of business and money happened for me. It was like,
Mhm.
oh, like this thing is a business. I'm really good at. I mean, I turned the whole business around with my dad, and we were like, we know how to run and operate companies well. If we did that with some financial discipline, with a financial goal, that could be even more beneficial for people. So I ended up like consulting for like 5 years, kind of flopping around and trying to I call it the 1.0 version where I created these 5 principles. And I really wanted my passion, Ron, is I love teaching people how this stuff works because
Mhm.
I do not like to be told what to do. I'm willing to listen if I respect the person, if they've got the credibility. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are the same. And I was so sick of consultants back when I had the business just sucking off the cash flow and sucking off our need to do things. And so like I didn't want to be part of that. So I was like, hey, I just want to teach people how to do this so that way like they can be in control of their destiny because control is a big thing. I think a lot of us want control, which is why we take this risk. So after consulting, I was really just that's where it really dawned on me like there's so few people that really understand valuations and how to grow equity value to make it all worth it, Ron. Like it's like I know that I want to create wealth, enjoy work, and make an impact, all those things. And that's what I notice a lot of other entrepreneurs want to do. And when you're not living in the intersection of all those, you could be making a lot of money, having a lot of fun. At some point, you're going to know, why am I doing this? What's the impact that I'm going to make? Or you could be making a big impact. You could be having a lot of fun. If you're not making enough money, you're going, I got to get rewarded for this. And so the whole goal is the reward is like, why are you doing this? I mean, the amount of people that look at me and say, what's your goal? They're like, 20 million in revenue. I'm like, who gives a shit? What if it's worth nothing? You're going to do all this for 10 years, invest all your time and energy and capital, and it could be worth nothing. Don't you want to know what creates value and how valuations work so that way you're paying attention to the right things? So that's really kind of the underlying passion is I love helping other people understand how to clarify that long-term goal and then how to get there.
You know what? One of the things I see is there's a little bit of a myth. People see like software as a service companies and let me think some like Shopify stores. There's a few out there that can trade on revenue, multiples of revenue. So they'll hear a story about somebody getting 2 times, 3 times revenue, and they think, well, that's how this works. So my brick and mortar, concrete company is going to get 3 times revenue, and it is not how this works, right? So I've actually had a call last week, I guess it was. No, about last week. Guy said, "Hey, I'm thinking about selling my company. Here's what's going on." I was like, first of all, I'm not a broker or an advisor. I'm interested in buying it if it's the right kind of company. Start talking. I was like, "Well, what is it you're wanting to do?" Well, I need $3.5 million, and I was like, "Okay, well, cool. How did you come up with that number? That's 2 times my revenue." And I was like,
Oh, it's either that or my retirement number. And it's like, they have to be like me saying to you around like, hey, I want you to pay $2 million for my house. Let's say it's worth 700 grand. Why? Well, because that's my retirement number. Well, that has nothing to do with the value of your house. It's like so common.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, and you just my first instinct, if I'm really interested in the company, the first thing I say is like, cool, let's see how we can get you there. And it's not because I don't know enough about the details of their company. And a lot of times how to get you there is like, look, you're gonna need to go to work with an advisor and you're gonna have to double your company because you're just not there yet. If you really need that number, like if it's your retirement number, you can get there. You probably can get there in 2 to 3 years, right? But it's not gonna, it's not today, and there's a lot of stuff you gotta do, right? There's a
Yep.
you know, so
Well, and going back to your cash flow comment, Ron, is
mm,
that every business, and by the way, every country, city, government, and household, everything will eventually come down to cash flow. There's no way around it, man. Like, so like Shopify or any of these companies, what's the trailing 12 months of EBITDA of Snapchat? Well, it's negative $600 million. Show me, if I give you money, how is it going to come back in the form of cash flow? So like revenue multiples are just a proxy for cash flow. It's some sort of like way of someone saying, hey, this is how much cash flow to eventually generate. My old business, and 20 million in revenue, it's usually 2/3, 1/3. So 1/3 was equipment revenue that was new every year, Ron, and then 2/3 was reoccurring bank finance locked in contracts. So our old industry prior to the last couple of years, that's been very wonky for a lot of other people as well. It used to trade on 1 times revenue of maintenance contracts. All they're doing is having a proxy for the EBITDA multiple equation. Because
Right.
you wouldn't know unless so for example, in my old industry, I say, hey Ron, what size company you have? And you're like, $10 million. I could go, well, 10 million. Well, it's going to be 2/3 maintenance contracts and one. So it's about that. You can do some back of the napkin math to say what kind of cash flow that could have. So I just wanted to make that note that yes, things trade on a multiple revenue. Someone's got to make money somewhere,
Right.
somehow, some way, because the money's going to have to go back to people in pension funds who the teachers or the cops have to use the money to buy groceries and to pay their mortgage. So I just think we've lost some stability. So we've lost grounding over the last 10 years on that concept.
So you put a lot of thought in this. Let's kind of go through the process, right? So somebody comes to you, they're maybe, they think they want to sell. They don't know realize they might want to sell now, but that they don't realize it's a couple years out. What does the conversation look like? That you're going to have with that potential business owner.
So I'll take some kind of just general scenarios. It usually starts with I get a phone call, and just before I get into this run, just to be clear, we're not investment bankers or brokers either. So
Mhm.
we have a training business, and we have a fractional CFO business. That's it. But we always are helping people view and run their company like a financial asset. So there's a lot of tie into M&A. We help people acquire if we're on the they have a CFO of ours, or help them sell it if they're engaged with us. But we're not bankers or brokers. It's just the concept that matters. And why is because, so let's start with how the conversation, like the sequence of events usually happens. It's usually like someone like you, Ryan, like someone calls me up and says, all right, Ryan, I want out. I'm like, out of what? Your job or your asset? And usually people look at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you get a W-2 paycheck, whether it's guaranteed payments or it's payroll, to do something. That's a job. That's different than this asset that you have equity in. So I can almost immediately people have very little understanding of what is this company worth? What is the equity valuation? How is that separate from my job? So we got to start there. Then the next thing is there's really 3 things everybody should be thinking about. One is what is the target equity valuation you want at a point in time in the future? We all I'm completely convinced that if we have enough time, energy, and capital, there's nothing you can't do. As long as it's a good idea and you execute upon it, you have enough time, energy, and capital to do whatever. You can create a unicorn, but it might take you 40 years. But you start putting a constraint on it, Ron, and now we have our decisions and trade offs. So if you said, I want a $10 million equity valued company in 2030, okay, now we're going to have to figure out what is the revenue and the gross profit. Well, essentially, how are we going to fund that growth? How does that growth impact our salary, our taxes, and our potential available distributions? So the first question was, what is the target equity valuation you want in a point in time? The
Mhm.
second question is, what is the annual income you want along the way through salaries and distributions? Because if you said, "Hey, I need 100 grand in or 100 grand in distributions on top of my 150 in salary," that's going to limit the amount of money we can reinvest for growth. So you might have to push off your timeline or reduce the valuation. It's just pure logic. So again, first thing, target equity valuation at a point in time. Second one is the target annual income you want along the way, salaries and distributions. The third thing is, what is the role that you want in the operations as a job along the way as well? And it can evolve. It could go from engineer or chief marketing officer or whatever the heck it is. And you can say, hey, in year 2, as we get to this big, then I want to hire a CEO. Then I want to move to the chairman of the board or what. You can at least paint out the role, the equity, and your income. Now you've got a framework, Ron, to make decisions. And you say, okay, hey, an executive I met at a conference, badass. I can't wait to give them some equity. It's like, okay, well then your company needs to be bigger because your equity target, Ron, is 10 million in 2030. So the company needs to be bigger. So that makes it worth it. So you have a framework to make decisions that we all have every day.
It's interesting is I interviewed probably close to 215, 220. I think the number exactly was 216 or 218 marketing companies last year. And it, out of all of them, I'd say probably 25. When you ask them, where do you want to be in 3 years? Right? They could give you short answers like, "No, out of here," or or whatever. But it's like to give you a number, it was interesting. Probably about 20 to 25% of them actually had a plan in their mind. And then you're cool. What is the plan process? Like, do you actually, how are you going to get there? Like, where you want to go? And then about only 25% of those people even knew. Most of them are so involved in day to day operations, they didn't know where they wanted to be in 2 to 3 years, right? And the ones that did say, "Well, I kind of want to be here," right? Is
Ron, I want to have this kind of ad spend in 2026. Like, who gives a shit?
right.
Honestly, like, I mean, it's going to be one KPI that matters, but like, I
It's it.
totally get it, man.
They had no plans, no step. Like, okay, what steps have you got in place? Like, what plans? They didn't have that. And then on the other side of the same thing, like, what does that do to the company? Like, a lot of people don't realize that, like, I want my revenue to, like you were talking about earlier, I want my revenue to be 10 million. Like, okay, great.
So
How do you think
what?
how do you think that's impacting the company? What are your margins like? What are the profits like? There are so many other things to come into play.
It's
And,
like, oh, let's give an example of that. Like we'll talk, going back to real estate.
mhm,
If I put a bathroom on my roof,
mhm,
if I spend 50 grand on putting a bathroom on my roof, would that make my house worth more money? If no one values it, who gives a shit? So
right.
again, if like when you think about like reinvesting back in a company, Ron, like this is like, so I live in Minnesota. So like, let's say you had $1 million in cash flow or EBITDA. So you have $1 million, you pay 350 grand in taxes, you got 650 left over. Let's say you take 250 out, is my math correct? No, 150 out, you got 500 grand left. So you took 150 in distributions, you have $500,000. Now you got your constraint because you took your money out, you paid your taxes, you have $500,000. What are you going to do with it? People don't know. They just make shit up every day. It's like, well, we're going to do this marketing platform. We're going to do this accounting system. We're going to like launch this product and just kind of hoping that it's going to work out. And it's like, no, like way to synthesize like, hey, if I reinvest $500,000, here's how I would love to hear people say it is, we're going to hire this executive. We're going to pay this recruiting fee, hire this executive. We're going to roll this out. It's going to de-risk the company because we're going to have more sustainable, predictable, and transferable cash flow. And therefore, there's going to be a higher multiple because we de-risked the cash flow. We reinvested the money for a return. But no one has the framework and they're just guessing. So like going back to the toilet on the roof, it's like that's what people are doing. It's just like buying and doing random stuff. And it's like, well, how do you know if anybody values that? Wouldn't it be nice? And what people value is sustainable, predictable, and transferable cash flow.
Earlier we were talking about the business owner, like, I want out. And you brought up a good point in your conversation. The first thing I always ask them is like, when you said you want out of your job or your asset, a lot of people don't realize that they love their asset. They love the company, like the people and everything else. They just have got to a position where they hate what they do,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're
Mm-hmm.
burned out on what they're having to do every day. And, it's like, I learned a lesson inside of the real estate world is don't solve the problem until you have the deed, right? A lot of times when these guys get on the phone, it's like, look, you really don't want to sell this business to me. Like, we all do and burn out. It's like, you love the business, you love the people. You hate what you're doing and you're running it wrong. If you sell it to me, you're going to have to sell it to me at a discount, or you're going to have to fix these things. And I promise you, if
You're
I
gonna
go,
and sell it to you and or stay with an earnout because they didn't run it, they didn't build it correctly. So
yeah,
they didn't actually get out of what they wanted out of at all.
and the thing is like once if we went through the steps I'd want you to do during that earnout phase, at the end of it, you're going to resent me for because you're going to be back to doing what you love, right? Because I'm gonna that's what I want to do inside of the companies. Is like, what are people really good at? What do they really love? And is there any overlap between them? Because sometimes there's no overlap. They really love to do something, they just don't have the freaking skills to get it done. And other
Mm-hmm.
times there's good overlap, but they're doing they're really good at X. They want to do X, but some reason the company's got them assigned to doing Y. And
Well, and being able to clearly articulate that is the first step,
right,
right? Like, oh, there's a job that I get a paycheck for, and oh, there's an asset. Now, what do I want with both? And like Ron, so there's a wonderful example I have with a client of ours where like when you think about those three things that I was talking about, target equity valuation at point in time, target income through salaries and distributions along the way, and then what's your role? So a lot of people can't immediately afford to hire a COO or GM or president. Like that's everybody's. I mean, I shouldn't say that's everybody's. It's a high frequent like goal of a lot of people I talk to. I want to be able to be more passive. Okay, makes sense. Well, usually the constraint is people cannot afford their lifestyle with their income if they were to hire the $200,000 person. So they're stuck. So the way to get out of that is to have your 3 financial statements tied together with a projection towards that equity goal. And you say, okay, in May, I'm going to get to a point where my cash flow, not my income statement, but my actual cash flow from operating activities can afford 20 grand a month of distributions while hiring the $200,000 person. So that's why like your role, being clear on your role and your income is huge with that target as a context, because then you can go, okay, in May or June, I can afford this person. I can elevate up to just distributions without impacting my lifestyle. And now I've got an asset that can continue to grow without my involvement. And I've had a client did just that, hired a president with a recruiter, and he's moving to freaking Hawaii next year. I mean, like it sounds like a joke, but it's actually true. I mean, the guy, he's a fantastic human being. He bought the company. It's a manufacturing firm from his dad. He's a psychologist, or he was a psychology degree. And he's like, I want to do other things. And he wants to have this asset without selling it. But there's like this plan to get out of that role first.
There's a kind of a newer, I don't know how new it is. There are people that have done it over the years, but there's a newer, it's resurging, and it's this kind of retiring out of your business, but owning it. You don't necessarily have to sell inside of this. So the reason I'm saying this is with what you guys do, I think it would be a great, if somebody wanted to do what I'm about to tell you, your company sounds like it would be perfect to do this, to help somebody get there. But to retire in place, meaning that they still own it. They step out, they become the chairman of the board. They do monthly vision, like, hey, making sure everybody's still on track, quarterly, strategic planning calls and stuff like that. But they're not in there on the day-to-day basis. And I think that's available to more companies than the owners actually imagine. I think a lot of the owners don't see that as like a possibility.
That's why they
And
call and say they want out, because they're burnt out because they're so trapped in their own job. I mean, it could be a $2 million job or $20 million job like my dad and I had. I don't care what it is. You got all the personal guarantees. You feel like you need to be the CEO. I mean, like, honestly, Ron, if my dad would have stepped aside in like year 5 and just been a salesperson, we could have had a $100 million company. But he thought he needed to be the CEO. It's like, dude, like, you got the attention span of a gnat. Like, you're not a good leader. Like, you're a copier sales guy. Go close deals. And so, like, I think there's all these narratives that we tell ourselves around. It's like, and by the way, you want to buy companies, and so do I. Like, cash flow, man. That's why. Like,
right.
it's so funny, Ron. Like, people are like, hey, like, I got this out of the blue offer, call like 25 million bucks. You think I should take it? I'm like, you know what you're going to do? You're going to sell your company. You're going to pay a bunch of tax, pay off your debt. Let's say you walk away with, let's say it's 18 million out of the 25. You're going to spend the next 12 months trying to figure out what to do with it, because we have high inflation, government bonds are junk, and you got all this shit. So you're going to have like a full-time job how to preserve your capital. And half of the time, people that sold companies who are dealing with that kind of wealth end up going and buy companies anyways, because they're like, now that I get it, I don't have to be the CEO, and I just want to collect the distributions and have the equity. And so it's just like this full circle. It's like, spare yourself some of the misery and be intentional with the decisions before you make a big decision.
It's interesting is I know I have a friend right now who's in that exact thing. He built something up. It was in the real estate space, but he was the CEO of it. But he built something up. He sold it, and he's like, I really don't know. Like he actually participated in some stuff in the merger and acquisition space because he's looking for something else to do. And I was like, and he's never had a W-2 job. When the last call I had with him, he's like, kind of would like to go work for a private equity company or something. I've never had a W-2 job. I don't even know how to go about doing it. I've never even had a resume, right? But there's a big lesson inside of there is you're a business. If you're out there, you're listening to this, you're thinking about selling your business, you're a business owner, not a wealth manager. And unless you've got a wealth manager plan, you're about to be handed a big tax check or big tax liability and a bunch of money you don't know what to do with or how to deal with it, right?
Amen. And that's why we became a wealth manager. We still messed up a bunch of shit, man. So that's
funny is,
like,
like, I'm a real estate junkie, so if I get cash laying around, I go buy more houses and owner finance them out to people. The problem with that is right now I'm sitting in a stage where that's even scary because they're overpriced. We're about to have a big correction. It may not be in 6 months. I'm not predicting anything. It might be sick. There's the real estate market's always been cyclical. It's going to have a correction. It's usually on about a 12 to 15 year cycle, depending on who you ask. And we're about 12 to 14. I think we're about 14 years into the cycle, right? So there's going to be a correction, and I don't want to be buying something fresh right now, you know. But that's still not even wealth management because everything's in one basket. So even with what I've got going on,
It's got to be
I'll,
diversified, man. Like,
yeah,
I mean, and there was I interviewed Mike McAllowitz. I think that's how you pronounce it. I always mess it up. From Profit First, and he was talking about he thought he had the Midas touch after he sold his company, and it was the touch of death. Like everything he touched, was not a good investment. And I see that as a very common theme, man, where people are like, "Oh, I built and grew and sold a successful company. I can do anything." It's like, well, copiers and IT services is way different than a software development firm that is doing water monitoring out of California. That's a startup.
right.
Way different type of business, and there's different people, different things, and it's just it's a word of caution that like get your savings where it needs to be, and then have some play money. But I think back to your whole point, companies are assets, and if you're choosing to keep your company or sell it, right now you're the equity owner of that, whatever the equity actually is worth. I mean, like understanding how it's valued and what you have the ability to do with it is important. That's kind of goes back to that tagline that we have: is view and run your company like a financial asset. What do you want with financial assets? You want them to grow in value, right? When they grow in value, you want to have the options to sell them to people that want them at the fair price,
Yeah,
and you want to
liquidity.
make sure you mitigate taxes along the way, right? So like I like that because there's this the whole exit planning industry. I'm like, I have like because I got certified like 7, 8 years ago or something like that. I'm like, okay, Ron, let me ask you a question about this topic. Do private equity firms do exit planning?
Private equity when they're I
And it's not a trick question. I don't want to trick you.
I'd
It's
say
just
everybody I've talked to, the private equity firms, they actually have an exit plan in place that I've talked. The ones I've talked to have an exit plan in place when they're bought the damn thing. So private equity, they're
yeah, because
buying a
it's an
company,
asset,
they know,
right?
right? They know what they're like. They're buying this to do this. There's the intent
Yeah.
purpose of
Yes,
and
intentional, right? It's
yeah,
the same thing with you when you buy real estate, right? You
yep,
buy the real estate at a price and you want to grow
yep,
it. You're not like quote unquote doing exit planning. You're
yep,
just an investor, right?
yep,
You're buying something and growing it and having the choices to
yep.
monetize it when you want. I think that's the one of the big takeaways. Is it's just and everything results in cash flow, and cash flow results in an equity valuation.
In the real estate world, I want to buy it at a discount, right? Then I want to sell it to some, I want to clean it up, sell it at full price, and earn interest on the whole valuation, right? So and that's the same thing inside of here. I want to buy something that at a cost that seems reasonable to me, that makes sense to it, that I see as a discount because I'm going to do X, Y, and Z and make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Every business buyer out there thinks they're going to fix something. That guy's been running it for 25 years, but you're going to change it. You're going to make it grow. I kind of laugh at that to some extent because it's not as easy as a lot of people think. They say
Amen.
it's going to
Amen
be.
to that.
eh, You know, short of like what we do, like the fastest way to grow these things is just buy other companies and bolt them on. Like as long as you can keep the people and do the integration side of it and understand the cultural matches, right?
That's 1,000 times harder than putting a deal together with some equity and debt, though. Like, I honestly, like, I amen to what you said, but it's like, I mean, I talk to these PE firms, and I'm like, they're like, oh yeah, let's roll up all these marketing companies or these, home remodelers or home service companies. I'm like, no shake. Well, that's a genius idea. Like, duh. Like, 2,000 other people have thought about that. Let's say you raise the money, which like in the last 10 years has been very easy with 0% rates out there. And
Hmm.
then they raise the money, you go buy the companies. And I know you've got experience in this. It's like, I mean, my business partner, they rolled up 18 companies in 20 months.
Hmm.
Good luck integrating 18 accounting systems, 18 HR systems, 18 payroll systems, 18 CRMs. Like, oh my God. And you have human beings that have redundant positions, that have egos and have feelings. And like, so you put all the deal together and you had this beautiful spreadsheet with this straight line math. And it's like, I mean, if all of that goes well, you got yourself a monumental task. And what I've been watching, depending on the PE firm and the roll up, it's like hot potato. They roll all this stuff up, multiple arbitrage, and throw the pile of shit onto someone else.
Mhm.
That's it. Someone's going to have to clean it up, and someone's going to have to realize the cash flow at some point.
What's the guy that owns Tiny? Andrew, I think is his first name. Let me see if I can look it up real quick. That's kind of the model I like right now. Is he's bought companies. I think they're worth. I think he's got enough companies. He's hitting that $1 billion mark, right?
Hmm.
Tiny.com. You know what I'm talking about?
I actually
Andrew.
don't. Huh.
He owns. I think he owns
Thinking
like
about
Meta
Andrew Warner.
Labs and no, it's I'll think of his name in a second. But the whole his concept, I mean, he does sell off some things, but his portfolio is crazy, right? If you look at what they own, like he was on a podcast not too long ago, and he's like, "Well, we bought the local bakery, and it was because it's his favorite one in town. He doesn't want it to go. It's a good business. It
That's
makes money,
awesome.
so he buys it and puts it in, in his
His
thing.
holdings.
Yeah, but I think I like the concept of the holding company. There's some things I'm looking to acquire right now to get the word out there. Um, but I'm also not opposed to buying things to fix them and sell them, to do the business flip. How
Hmm.
many of your customers are like, it sounds like a majority of your customers now are they've owned it for a long time and they're trying to figure out what's next? Or do you have some acquisition
Some that are,
entrepreneur customers?
yeah, I definitely have some acquisition entrepreneurs. I have a gentleman, he bought a sign company handful of years ago from a baby boomer, and the goal is to view and run the company like a financial asset, to
Right,
create wealth and not just pay attention to vanity metrics. So like, it doesn't matter. I mean, like Apple and Amazon have 3 financial statements, and their valuations based on a multiple of EBITDA. I
right,
mean, yeah, I know they trade on a multiple revenue depending on, but like everything will boil down to cash flow. So does the laundromat down the road. That's a couple hundred grand in revenue. So like
right,
everybody's got 3 financial statements. So like it depends on how people want to create their wealth and what their intentions are. I mean, I'd say half of our people are people that want to, like, I mean, they've shifted their mindset from listening to the podcast, going through our training, and want to spend 3 to 5 years of intentional effort to get that equity growth that they want, to have the choices that they want. Other people are like, hey, I want to do this right from the start. I mean, and what I see with some of those people, they become actually acquisition entrepreneurs themselves. You know what I mean? So they buy that first company, and then it's like, hey, once you get the platform going, you got your financials built, you got your strategy built, you got your strategy rolled in your financials, you get your key executive team. Like bolting on another company is not that difficult. I mean,
right.
it is. I mean, I
The
shouldn't say it like that.
integration, right? The people
Yeah.
side of it, getting the people to stay motivated and not leave. I was talking to a guy right now, that's all he does is the integration of people. He was on the show a few weeks ago, and, I came up with a brilliant idea, and I'm thinking about hiring some software engineers to see if I can pull it off because I can't find it out there, and that's to s to baseline every employee you have on LinkedIn, any of the job board sites out there, and watch Glassdoors and stuff, and watch as you do your announcement, right, of the acquisition or exit, and start really paying attention of leading indicators, like how
Hmm.
many people updated their LinkedIn profile, right? Most people don't update their LinkedIn profile until they're ready to start looking around. How many, how many
That's awesome. Yeah, totally. Makes
yeah,
sense.
because if you knew that on average, you have 100 employees on average, you get 1 or 2 LinkedIn updates a month because you're watching the profiles of all your employees, and all of a sudden you decide to, hey, we're getting acquired by XYZ Corp, and 35% of your company updates the resume. Uh,
I would love to see the data on acquisitions. How many people immediately go update it? I wouldn't be surprised if it's the third every time.
yeah, and
It seems reasonable.
the advanced side of that software tool would be start tracking like clusters. So if you ever watch, especially in the tech industry where I came from originally, when somebody like when I left from one tech company to another, within about 12 months, a lot of my employees were working for me again because
Hmm.
I pulled them right because I know they're good. I know what they do. They like working with me. When if
Hmm.
a lot of times I got to ride the .com crash back in early 2000s, but the a lot of times that we were leaving because we didn't have much of a choice, right?
Hmm.
Excite.com blew up. I was the senior director of Excite.com. And, so when I left, a lot of a couple of the guys there, they ended up going with me to the next place, right? And then,
Nice. Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
yeah, that place sold to Symantec, and like, hey, we sold to Symantec. We don't want to work over here. Where are you working now, right? So, anti-spam company I was working for got bought by Symantec,
Hmm.
and so there was just that there's that. So if you could cluster that inside of there too, like who's worked for the same your managers and your leaders who's worked for them at 2 or 3 different companies.
Well,
You could
and it's what do you think about around why people probably well, why people go look right away is because of uncertainty. I mean,
absolutely.
this is why a clear goal and a clear plan on how to accomplish that goal that's reasonable and based in reality. You go talk to people about that, man. People are very receptive to it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like it's. I don't know. I'm a visionary at heart, right? So like I love finding that picture and then beating the drum of like this is where we're going, being that cheerleader, and like so it's a little bit more of my default mode where
Hmm.
like the amount of people, if they just articulated their goal, target equity value, how are we going to get there, and then got other people on board, acquiring a company. I mean, people are yearning and starving for leadership, man. Clear direction of someone they respect. I mean, it's not so like I think if you like focused on some of those soft skills, then I mean, again, you get the deal done, then you can mitigate some of that exodus with just being a freaking human, man. I don't know.
Right. It's all in communication. Everything, and I've said this before, and I'll say it 100 million times. Everything you have now, everything you want to have in the future, everything you've ever had in the past, is a direct correlation to conversations you've either had, should
Mm.
have had, or avoid having. Right. So
Mhm.
all your
Mhm.
success and failure, the difference between, and it's a horrible example because of his last couple of years. But the difference between me and like a real estate investor, like what Donald Trump was I was out there talking about to homeowners about buying houses, and he was out there talking about banks about buying and building golf courses and skyscrapers. Right, both in real estate. Just a different conversation, a different communication with different people. So it all boils down to the conversation, the
Mm.
communication.
Like it.
So one of the things I was looking on your website is one of the things I've noticed with a lot of business owners, and I'm kind of figuring out if you guys deal with some of this too, is a lot of times you start looking at these businesses and they've got the wrong butts in the wrong seats, or they got the wrong butts in the seat any one way or the other. And it's just because, well, this guy did something to me, for me 10 years ago, and he saved the company 20 grand. And he hasn't done shit since then, but he's still here, and I got loyalty to him, and I'm gonna keep him in place. And as far as running your business like an asset, you can't think like that, right? There
Mhm.
are there are people in almost every company that I find people in almost every company. There's usually one or two I refer to as poison pills. They hate being there, they
Mhm.
hate their job, but they just show up every day. And when they're around, nobody wants to work with them. But when I worked at Lockheed, there was one. When every company I can think of, I can almost still see them. That was 30 years ago. If I can almost, I'm dating myself here. Uh, I can close my eyes and think of a company, and I can see the face of the person there that like nobody wanted to be around, right? Sometimes it might have been me, but but
If you
get
don't see anybody, it's you.
yeah,
No, I'm just
like
kidding.
if you don't see anybody, you probably should pull up a mirror. Um, the question I ask is like as you're going through the process and stuff, is there any when you're looking at running this thing as an asset, do you guys look at the personnel side of it too? Like who's in these seats and what are they capable of
Oh,
accomplishing?
it's crucial, man. Like it, I'll just kind of the overview I give is like every business, it's like the same things have to happen every single time, Ron. Like if we went and bought a business, whether you own a business right now currently or you're going to buy a business, think about it. Like if you are committed to keeping your company, you're essentially repurchasing it. You're deciding to keep investing in that asset. So the first thing that you and I would do if we went and bought a garage door company, we'd know what it's worth because we would buy it. So we now have our point A,
Hmm.
right? So what's the buy price? Point A. The first this is the order that I would approach every single business in. We now know what the price is worth. Well, guess what? I need to figure out what the hell's going on. So I would build the financials the way that we build them, which is the income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement, tie those together, get the trailing 12 months to understand the history of where things have been, sit down, build an annual budget from the ground up. So you start with sales. You go, okay, sales, what are the different product lines and the different product lines and services that we're going to sell over the next 12 months? Separate them, have your cost of goods structure tied to the revenue lines with the margins that you think you're going to hit in the months that you're going to hit, not divide by 12. Because if you're seasonal, you're not going to have any cash in May if all your shit comes in December. So like build a 12-month budget. Then you tie your income statement. You have your finance team build out the balance sheet and the cash flow statement. So you tie those three together to see into the future your income, your gross profit, your EBITDA, your distributions, your taxes, and the future equity of the company. So I do that for the first year, put some basic, basic assumptions from years 2 to 5, tie that to an equity valuation that I want in 5 years. Buy the company. That's the framework. Otherwise, what the hell are we doing? So that's the framework. Then what we do is to say, how's our strategy? Meh. Build a good strategic plan, roll that strategic plan into the financials so you know how much it's going to cost. Then you need a team. Who's going to implement that? Well, get the KPIs, get the team, let them execute like hell using like something like Traction or EOS.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so the team is the people that are going to be doing it. And so the way that going back to your point, man, I mean, we had a business for 20 years. Jeff and Stan, and I could go through these people for 20 years. They were on our team. And I was a soccer player growing up. Like, just because your goalie saved a goal 5 years ago, if we're losing right now, I'm sorry, dude. I love you, but like, you suck. I did without being too facetious on that round is like, because I don't like conflict that much. I mean, I think I can always see the best in everybody. So that's a difficult thing for me. So I do that a little bit of self-preservation. But what I would do is this plan that I just mentioned and the KPIs that are based in truth and reality and where we want to go, because we want to go there for a reason that is clearly articulated. I can sit down, if it was you that I was having an issue with, be like, Ron, like we said, this is where we're going. These are the, whether you're a purchasing manager, you're the sales director, or the CEO, there's a list of 3 to 5 KPIs that would be successful for your job. We tied it to the goal. We all talked about this and you're not doing it. Like, what are we supposed to do about this? So I put it on that person and I let them essentially hang themselves. So instead of I hated the life of being in a world of subjectivity,
Mm-hmm.
where the CEO or owner could just be like at their, whim, if they're emotional that day, doesn't like someone. It's like, no. That's the goal. Here are the numbers. Here are the strategies. Here are the KPIs. And this person's doing their job. So I really think the people are huge.
So what's the plan? What are the what's the goal? What's the plan to get to the goal? What are the KPIs, the tracking points of interest to tell you you're on track to get to the goal? And the thing I would do, and I'm doing right now as I evaluate these companies, is who do I need? The kind of the job description of the people I would
Mm-hmm.
need to make that occur. Like, what skill set would the CFO need to do his role in this position? I don't care who's in there now. I'm not going to look at their
Yeah.
resume and see
Yeah.
what skill set I have. Is like, with the current goal, the plan to get to the goal, the KPIs that I have, who's done this before that would fit my model, and what were their success traits? And then you take that job description and go, does that match who I have? And if is it close enough I can train him to get him there,
Mm-hmm.
or do we have a real problem, right?
I mean, it's
And
a sports team, right? Like we have like companies or sport. I mean, this is my favorite sport, man. Like
got
it
fired, he's
in
traded.
I get exactly. There you go. I love it. Yeah, it's exactly. He's traded to someone that is unknown of yet, and it's not
Yep.
my responsibility anymore.
Yeah. Not fired. You're not fired. You're traded. Go to another team.
I love it.
So okay. So we're 48 minutes into this already, and I'm loving this conversation. Let's kind of dive into. Let's just kind of story time, man. This is my favorite time. Tell us something about Tell me about a company that was your favorite. Maybe it's a turnaround story. Maybe it's just a full freaking cool project, right? One of the favorite things I said, what's the weirdest thing you've ever worked on, right? I had a company on here, so we
Mm.
built the giant unicorns that people can ride in New York, the little spring unicorns. He's a foundry company. It does steel casting, and they made these rideable spring. You've seen them in the playgrounds, right? The little
Uh-huh.
bitty metal horses that the kids can get on a ride. He made
Oh
two of
yeah,
them
yeah.
for New York that are size big enough that you and I could get on. So just what's the most interesting thing you could tell me about a client you've had?
Oh man. I think it goes back to that guy I was telling you about who is moving to Hawaii. Like
Mhm.
it he's just done the hard work and he deserves the outcome that he has. Like I just love that. I love the story. Like and for like if the more of those stories that I can help manufacture, the better. Of like I was blind, I was just doing random stuff. Then I got clear on my goals and like did hard work against those goals. I mean, I know people were they were losing significant amount of money over the last couple of years because of all the reasons we know, and willing to clear or clarify their target and then sit down and do the hard work to get there. so many people just think shit's gonna fall in their lap, and it's just like, I don't know. Like, there's this phrase that I like. I can't remember for the life of me. It's like 2 months ago. Happiness lies in the delta between reality and expectations. I love this. Let's get that in line. So
Mm-hmm.
I think your question is, I have a lot of stories I know of people that when they go through the training or they're working, or honestly, or they listen to my podcast or whatever it is, and they're like, oh, like, and then they kind of have that light bulb moment. So like there was a gentleman also, he was like, dude, it's like seeing the Matrix. It's like taking the red pill. Like, I get it. So I think I don't know, Ron, if there's any particular one. I'm trying to think. I mean, I got a lot of crazy horror stories.
Yeah.
I got one. That could be a whole episode in itself. What's the stupidest things you've seen in the business from employees doing? Like, I got plenty of HR stories that may or may not be legally allowed to be shared.
Yeah, I used to do marketing coaching. I was a guerrilla marketing coach for Jay Conn Levinson's team, the guerrilla marketing thing. That's and one of the I'll give you a quick one for me. This guy calls me, says, "I got to cut my marketing budget. I need money." I said, "We're doing good, man. We're growing. Why do you want to cut it?" And he's like, "Well, I need money for attorneys." I said, "Okay, needing money for attorneys for what?" "Well, I'm getting a divorce." I said, "Divorce?" I just did the repeat, like the NLP thing. I repeated something so he'd tell me the deeper story, right? I was like, "Divorce?" "Yeah, the wife figured out I'm cheating with the secretary." And I was like, "Okay, you don't need a marketing coach. You don't even need a business coach. You probably need a psychologist or, some moral guidance here." And
Yeah,
I'm
right.
not that guy, but it's every business has, the same type of, story. A lot of these individuals,
We're all based in people, man.
we're all
It's
people. It's
businesses,
all you.
yeah, it's all people, man. Like, you can look at a spreadsheet and it can, like, spread all the financials is the story that's actually happening in the business.
It's interesting that a realization hit me while we were talking on that. I love that type of stuff when it happens. I don't do my own accounting because I'm horrible at it. I've got enough college degrees. I've had to take enough accounting classes and know what it is, but I don't. I rarely even open my own QuickBooks. I'll take a look at it and I get my reports and stuff, but I'm not the guy that enters it. But you think about most of the business owners out there and I've tried. I've tried to do it. It's just my heart's not in it. That said, QuickBooks doesn't make that easy. I don't think of it as a single thing where it says, you can log in and just like, I just want to log in every day and see, my three statements without actually having to like click generate report and stuff like that. And there's no dashboard out there that's like all the accounting software should just plug into those. And I should be able to pull them up and see live at any given time. I think it's overly complex. I think that somebody could go out there
Unnecessarily. Yeah. Yeah.
unnecessarily complex. I think
Yep.
somebody could go out there and create a tool or an accounting mechanism for the mom and pop single operator type of companies that will do enough of the accounting to keep them out of trouble, but help them run it like an asset, like you're talking. Help them always see those statements. Help them understand what those statements are, and put them in a way that they could to do it on a day in and day
Make
out
some sense
basis.
out of it.
Make some sense out of it, and it's not intuitive. I mean, like I said, I tease around and say I got more college degrees than the average fool should have. But, you know, and if I really wanted to figure it out, and I'm kind of having to right now just because I'm evaluating company after company after company, and I'm tired of sending stuff over to a forensic CPA and go, why in the hell is this like this? This doesn't look right, right? Like, yeah, they just, there's no clear cut that says X, Y. This is done by step 1, 2, and 3. Everybody can do it slightly different, and it's not necessarily wrong how they did it, but it's just not how I've seen it the last 50 other times. So you're like, why did they put that there? Um, do you think there's actually a play out there to make something simpler, like a
Oh,
set of
they have it. Yeah, it's out there. And before I get into like what the solution potentially is, so like I was a copier sales rep.
right?
Finance was my worst degree in college. So like I just want to constantly be saying that. Like, and you have more college degrees than me, Ron. And so like I didn't have a try number 2 on that. And my point is, like, I've never met an entrepreneur that isn't capable of telling one hell of a story. They can tell one heck of a story about where they've been, where they're going, every single time. Then the follow-up question from any investor, any bank, or anybody is going to be, prove it.
Hmm.
The way you prove it is in the numbers. The numbers are just the story of the business. It's the language of the business. Yes, there's a lot of jargon and acronyms and all that crap that's all over, but the whole story that you just said, like, why did they put that there? all of that, I don't even know what that story is that you're referring to, but I don't even have to, because all I can think of is he's either talking about a revenue line or a cost of goods. Say, okay, like, well, why is that there? I don't know. Why did they buy that shit and put it there? I don't know. So like, my point is every entrepreneur should be concerned of that the financials are reflecting the story of the business. So having your chart of accounts organized in a way that you could tell a story about it. Like I brought out a consulting company that does 10 million in revenue, and their revenue line was one line that said consulting. What does that tell me? Absolutely nothing. Tells me nothing. Oh, well, actually, we do audits and we do the interim CEO stuff. And we do this. I didn't know that. Prove it. So my point is, there's this, like, if you can't tell a story around your numbers, you don't have to do the accounting. No one listening to this should do their accounting or their bookkeeping and that stuff. Pay someone to do it, but you have it set up right. And as long as your AP and your AR and the things are happening and their expenses and the revenues falling into the buckets that they should, then going to your play about the software. So it's called Giraffe. It's JIRAV, Giraffe. It's spelled Giraffe is what it looks like. Point is, it's an FP&A financial dashboard. It's an API connection to people's QuickBooks or Xero or whatever their accounting systems are. So our team we have the training program. We have this offering where we're a value-added reseller of them, and we have our CFO services. So like for a ridiculously nominal fee. I mean, you can go in there. We have our templates, so we don't have to clean up everybody's books, but it's to the point where it's telling you the story that you want to be able to see. So I have a commercial cleaning client as a commercial cleaner as a client. She got her numbers into this. She's like, I finally can see for the first time what I've been feeling for 16 years. And that's what you're talking about, right? Like instead of looking at some crazy report, like one PDF of an income statement from QuickBooks, one PDF of a balance sheet, like, what the hell does this mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's more about into the future, which is like predictive analytics of what is the output we want, where if I grow my revenue in these product or service lines by X, I have to hire these people, which is Y, and that's going to result in this much cash flow, which is Z. Is that a good thing for me? And what is the value of the company? Like, I'm convinced that every entrepreneur knows those questions to ask. They just don't have the right information, or they're talking to a CPA that's never ran a business. And we're only talking about the end of the year tax planning, if they're even being proactive.
We've covered a lot of topics, and I've asked you a bunch of questions here. What should we be like? What am I missing? Like, what should we
just think about? Just think about these questions. Those 3 questions that I was saying. Target equity value at a point in time that you want. What is the target annual income you want through salaries and distributions on the way? And what does the role need to look like that you want on the way as well? Just think about it. And you're going to be in like the 2% of people that are starting to actually think about this stuff.
I got it. So how do people reach out to you? I want to make sure we know how people can tell them about your show, tell them about how to reach out to you and stuff too.
Everything's the website, arkona.io, arkona.io. Shows out there, materials about our stuff. We got more content, videos, and links to the calendar or my LinkedIn or anything like that. So best place is the website for sure.
Okay, cool. And then if myself or the audience could do anything for you, if we could help you in any shape form, what would that be? What would be your big ask?
Check out the podcast, just like it's hopefully I'm bringing value just like you are. And if people are experiencing that value, then they can share it with others. But yeah, intentional growth is on the website. It's also on all the major channels as well.
Yeah, I put you on my listening list, and I listened to part of one on the last drive. So you're on my drive list anytime. I don't drive a whole lot now because I moved to a vacation resort area of California, but I drive to the ocean over here, and I'll download an episode. And it's about 25 minutes, so I get to listen to chunks when I head over to you're saying, we were talking earlier about somebody else in this space, and like, well, I'm not sitting at the ocean. I technically could, but this is California, and it's cold. This morning it was 48 at my house in the redwood forest, right?
It's snowing,
I drove
here,
over.
Man.
It doesn't snow here very often. I kind of live in a unique area where the ocean kind of keeps it cool, but never cold enough to snow. Because I'm cool. I'm about 20 minutes, about 15 miles right off the Pacific coast in California. But I often take Zoom calls with that in the background. They're like, "How do you get your background to move?" I turn off the voice isolation, and they go, "No, it's real. Those are real
That's
birds
awesome.
flying by."
Yeah.
I'm sitting at a park bench overlooking the ocean. I found a spot that 4 bars of 5G right there. Right at
I love it. I love it.
right off of a cliff. But I appreciate having you on here today. I just wanted to make sure everybody knows how to get to. Like, what's the big takeaway? Like, you already kind of covered this already, but let's listen to the show on like one big takeaway. Somebody listened to the show. Um,
Make it all worth it, man. Like I told you the three things that you should think about, and then the overarching theme is view and run your company like a financial asset, or if it's just going to be an annual income and it's a job, just admit it. Then you can avoid all the flashy objects and all the random stuff that you would distract yourself with. Like we just all put so much damn work into being entrepreneurs. Like make it worth it and create wealth, enjoy work, make an impact, make sure that you're progressing towards that outcome of more choices instead of just spinning your wheels. So make it worth it.
well, hang on up for a second after the show. I want to appreciate. I do appreciate having. Want to appreciate. I do appreciate having you on here. Thank you. I guess we'll call that a show then.
Yeah, appreciate it, man.
All right. Let me.